baby, do you recognize me? Look, it's home. Holds up a jar of some random thing. It's homemade dry shampoo. My sister-in-law made some for me when I went to her house yesterday. I'm gonna try it later. My hair's a little dirty today, but not too bad to where I need dry shampoo. Okay, what happened? Oh, oh, I know what happened. I remember what happened. Hold on, this book is big. Adian and Lysandra. Pain. That's all I have to say for them. Pain, and just, I wish Adian could have been better, because truly, if Adian had been better, then we could have had it all. We could have had it all with them together. But he wasn't, and now she rightfully told him that she wants literally nothing to do with him ever again. So, good for her, I guess. My dreams of them being together were crushed, but I didn't want her with him anymore after the way he treated her anyway. So, we're reading 54 through 56. And, I'm sorry, I had to put chapstick on because my lips hurt. We'll get started right now. Chapter 54. We're almost halfway through. Kale hand-fed an apple to Faracia, the beautiful black mare skittish after her unprecedented flight. It seemed even Hella's horse could be frightened, though Kale supposed any wise person would find dangling hundreds of feet in the air to be unnerving. Someone else could do that for you. Leaning against the stable wall of the keep, Irene watched him work, monitoring each deeply limping step. You should rest. Kale shook his head. She doesn't know what the hell is happening. I'd like to try to calm her before she beds down. Before battle tomorrow. Before they might stand a chance of actually saving Anil. He was still working through all that had transpired these months he'd been gone. The battles and losses. Where Dorian had gone with Manon and the 13. Kale could only pray his friend was successful, and that he didn't take it upon himself to forge the lock. Needing to unravel all he'd learned, he'd left Aylin and the others near the Great Hall to find whatever food they could, immediately bringing Faracia down here with him, mostly for the safety of everyone around the Munich horse, since Faracia had tried to take a chunk out of the soldier nearest her the moment her hood had come off. Even the hood hadn't concealed from her what exactly was happening to the oversized crate they'd buckled her into. But Faracia hadn't bitten off his hand before she nibbled at the apple, so Kale prayed she forgive him for the rough flight. Part of him half wondered if the mare knew that his back ached, that he needed his cane, but that he chose to be here. He ran a hand down her ebony mane, then patted her strong neck. Ready to trample some Val grunts tomorrow, my friend. Faracia huffed, angling a dark eye at him as if to say, Are you? Kale smiled, and Irene laughed softly. I should head back to the hall, his wife said. See who needs help. But she lingered. Their eyes met over Faracia's powerful back. He came around the horse, still mindful of her biting. I know, he said quietly. Irene angled her head. No, what? Kale interlaced their fingers. Damn! And then laid their hands into atop her still flat abdomen. Oh, was all Irene said, her mouth popping open. How? Kale's heart thundered. It's true then. Her golden eyes scanned his. Do you want it to be? Kale slid a hand against her cheek. More than I ever realized. Irene's smile was wide and lovely, enough to fracture his heart. It's true, she breathed. How far along? Almost 2 months. He studied her stomach, the place that would soon swell with a child growing inside her. Their child. You didn't tell me, I'm assuming because you didn't want me to worry. Irene bit her lip. Something like that. He snorted. And when you were waddling around, belly near bursting, Irene whacked his arm. I'm not going to waddle. Kale laughed and tugged her into his arms. You'll waddle beautifully, was what I meant to say. Irene's laughter reverberated into him, and Kale kissed the top of her head, her temple. We're having a child, he murmured. onto her hair. Her arms came around him. "We are," she whispered. "But how did you know?" "My father," KoA grumbled, "apparently possesses better observational skills than I do." He felt more than saw her cringe. "You're not angry I didn't tell you?" "No. I would have appreciated hearing it from your lips first, but I understand why you didn't want to say anything yet. Stupid as it might be," he added, nipping at her ear. Irene jabbed him in the ribs, and he laughed again. Laughed, even though every day they'd fought in this battle, every opponent he'd faced, he'd dreaded making a fatal mistake, had been unable to forget that should he fall, he'd be taking them both with him. Her arms tightened around him, and Irene nestled her head against his chest. "You'll be a brilliant father," she said softly. "The most brilliant one to ever exist." High praise indeed, coming from a woman who wanted to toss me from the highest tower of the Torre a few months ago. A healer would never be so unprofessional. KoA grinned and breathed in her scent before he pulled back and brushed his mouth against hers. "I'm happier than I can ever express, Irene, to share this with you. Anything you need, I'm yours to command." Her lips twitched downward. Dangerous words. But KoA ran his thumb over her wedding band. "I'll have to win this war quickly then, so I can have our house built by the summer." She rolled her eyes. A noble reason to defeat Erwin. KoA stole another kiss from her. "As much as I would like to show you just how much I am at your command," he said against her mouth, "I have another matter to deal with before bed." Irene's brows rose. He grimaced. "I need to introduce Aelin to my father, before they run into each other." The man hadn't been near the hall when they'd arrived, and KoA had been too worried for Ferocia's well-being to bother hunting him down. Irene cringed, though amusement sparked in her eyes. "Is it bad if I want to join you? And bring snacks?" KoA slung an arm around her shoulders, giving Feracia a farewell stroke before they left. Despite the cane, each step was limping, and the pain in his back lanced down his legs, but it was secondary. All of it, even the damned war, was secondary to the woman at his side, to the future they'd build together. As well as Irene's conversation with KoA had gone, that's how badly things went between Aelin Galathinius and his father. Irene didn't bring snacks, but that was only because by the time they reached the Great Hall, they had intercepted his father, storming toward the room where Aelin and her companions had gone for a reprieve. "Father," KoA said, falling into step beside him. Irene said nothing, monitoring KoA's movements. The pain in his back had to be great if he was limping this deeply, even while her magic refilled. She had no idea where he'd left his chair, if it had been crushed under falling debris. She prayed it had not. His father snapped. "You fail to wake me when the Queen of Terrasen arrives at my castle." It wasn't a priority. KoA halted before the door that opened into the small chamber that had been vacated for the Queen, and knocked. A grunt was the only confirmation before Irene's husband shouldered open the door enough to poke his head inside. "My father," KoA said to whoever was inside, presumably the Queen, "would like to see you." Silence, then the rustling of clothes and steps. Irene kept back as Aelin Galathinius appeared, her face and hands clean but clothes still dirty. At her side stood that towering, silver-haired Fey warrior, Rowan Whitethorn, whom the royals had spoken of with such fear and respect months ago. In the room, Lady Elide sat against the far wall, a tray of food beside her, and the giant white wolf lay sprawled on the ground, monitoring with half-lidded eyes. A shock to see the shift, to realize these Fae might be powerful and ancient, but they still had one foot in the forest. The Queen, it seemed, preferred the form as well, her delicately pointed ears half hidden by her unbound hair. Behind her, there was no sign of the golden-haired, melancholy warrior. Gavriel, or the utterly terrifying Lorcan. Thank Silba for that, at least. Aelin left the door open, though their 2 court members remained seated, bored, almost. "Well now," was all the Queen said as she stepped into the hall. KoA's father looked over the warrior prince at her side. Then he turned his head toward KoA and said, "I assume they met in Wendelin, after you sent her there." Irene tensed at the taunting in the man's voice. Bastard. Horrible bastard. Aelin clicked her tongue. Yes, let's get all of that out of the way. Though I don't think your son really regrets it, does he?" Aelin's eyes shifted to Irene, and Irene tried not to flinch under the turquoise and gold stare. Different from the fire she'd beheld that night in Inish, but still full of that razor-sharp awareness. Different, They were both different from the girls they'd been. A smile curved the queen's mouth. I think he made out rather well for himself. She frowned up at her consort. Irene, at least, doesn't seem like the sort to hog the blankets and snore in one's ear all night. Irene coughed as Prince Rowan only smiled at the queen. I don't mind your snoring, he said mildly. Aylin's mouth twitched when she turned to Kael's father. Irene's own laughter died at the lack of light on the man's face. Kael was tense as a drawn bowstring as the queen said to his father, Don't waste your breath on taunts. I'm tired and hungry, and it won't end well for you. This is my keep. Aylin made a good show of gaping at the ceilings, the walls, the floors. Is it really? Irene had to duck her head to hide her grin. So did Kael. But Aylin said to the Lord of Anil, I trust you're not going to get in our way. A line in the sand. Irene's breath caught in her throat. Kael's father said simply, Last I looked, you were not queen of Ardalan. No, but your son is hand to the king, which means he outranks you. Aylin smiled with horrific sweetness at Kael. Haven't you told him that? Irene and Aylin were no longer the girls they'd been in Inish. Yes, but that wildfire still remained in the queen's spirit. Wildfire touched with insanity. Kael shrugged. I figured I'd tell him when the time arose. His father glowered. Prince Rowan, however, said to the man, You've defended and prepared your people admirably. We have no plans to take that from you. I don't need the approval of fey brutes, the lord sneered. Aylin clapped Rowan on the shoulder. Brute. I like that. Better than buzzard, right? Irene had no idea what the queen was talking about, but she held in her laugh anyway. Aylin sketched a mocking bow to the Lord of Anil. On that lovely parting note, we're going to finish up our dinners. Enjoy your evening. We'll see you on the battlements tomorrow. And please, do rot in hell. I love her. I love her so much. I need water. Then Aylin was turning away, a hand guiding her husband inside, but not before the queen threw a grin over her shoulder to Irene and Kael and said, eyes bright with joy and warmth this time, Congratulations. How she knew, Irene had no idea, but the fae possessed a preternatural sense of smell. Irene smiled all the same as she bowed her head, just before Aylin slammed the door in the Lord of Anil's face. Kael turned to his father, any hint of amusement expertly hidden. Well, you saw her. Kael's father shook with what Irene supposed was a combination of rage and humiliation, and stalked away. It was one of the finest sights Irene had ever seen. From Kael's smile, she knew her husband felt the same. I love her so much. What a horrible man. Elide finished off her chicken leg before handing the other to Fenris, who had shifted back into his fae form. He tore into it with a growl of appreciation. Poor Lord Kael. Aylin, her aching legs stretched out before her as she leaned against the wall, finished off her own portion of chicken, then dug into a hunk of dark bread. Poor Kael. Poor his mother. Poor his brother. Poor everyone who has to deal with him. At the lone, narrow window of the room, monitoring the dark army hundreds of feet below, Rowan snorted. You were in rare form tonight. I thought I'd sneeze. Aylin saluted him with her hunk of hearty oaten bread. Anyone who interrupts my dinner risks paying the price. Rowan rolled his eyes but smiled, just as Aylin had seen him smile when they'd both scented what was on Irene, the child in her. She was happy for Irene, for them both. Kael deserved that joy, perhaps more than anyone, as much as her own mate. Aylin didn't let the thoughts travel further, not as she finished her bread and came to the window, leaning against Rowan's side. He slid an arm around her shoulders, casual and easy. None of them mentioned Maeve. Elide and Fenris continued eating in silence, giving them what privacy they could in the small, bare room they'd been sharing, sleeping on the bedrolls. The Lord of Anil, it seemed, did not share her appreciation for luxury, or basic comforts for his guests, like hot baths or beds. The men are terrified, Rowan said, gazing out at the levels of the keep below. You can smell it. They've held this keep for days now. They know what's waiting for them at dawn. Their fear, Rowan said, his jaw tightening, is proof they do not trust our allies, proof they don't trust the Kagan's army to actually save them. It will make for sloppy fighters, could create a weakness where there shouldn't be one. Perhaps you should have told Lord Kael. Lord Kael. Why did I... That's not even in the sentence. Sorry, y'all, Aelin said. He could give them some motivational speech. I have a feeling KoA has given them plenty. This sort of fear rots the soul. What's to be done for it, then? Rowan shook his head. I don't know. But she sensed he did know. Sensed that he wanted to say something else, and either their current company or some sort of hesitation barred him. So Aelin didn't push, and surveyed the battlements with their patrolling soldiers, the sprawling, dark army beyond. Baying cries and howls rent the night, the sounds unearthly enough that they dragged a shudder down her spine. Is a land battle easier or worse than one at sea? Aelin asked, her husband, her mate, peering at his tattooed face. She'd only faced the ships in Skulls Bay, and even that had been over relatively quickly. And against the Ilkin who'd swarmed them in the stone marshes, it had been more of an extermination than anything. Not what awaited them tomorrow. Not what her friends had fought on the narrow sea, while she and Manon had been in the mirror. Then with Maeve on the beach. Rowan considered. They're just as messy, but in different ways. I'd rather fight on land, Fenris grumbled. Because no one likes the smell of wet dog, Aelin asked over her shoulder. Fenris laughed. Exactly because of that. At least he was smiling again. Rowan's mouth twitched, but his eyes were hard as he surveyed the enemy army. Tomorrow's battle will be just as brutal, he said. But the plan is sound. They'd be on the battlements with KoA, readying for any desperate maneuvers Morath might attempt when they found themselves being herded and crushed by the Kagan's army. A lead would be with Irene and the other healers in the Great Hall, helping the injured. Where Lorcan and Gavriel would be, Aelin could only assume. Both had peeled off upon arriving, the latter taking watch somewhere, and the former likely brooding, but they'd probably be fighting right alongside them. As if her thoughts had summoned him, Gavriel slipped into the room. The army looks quiet enough, he said by way of greeting, then unceremoniously dropped to the floor beside Fenris and hauled the platter of chicken toward him. The men are rife with fear, though. Days of defending these walls have worn on them. Rowan nodded, not bothering to tell the lion. They'd just discussed this as Gavriel ripped into the food. We'll have to make sure they don't balk tomorrow, then. Indeed. I was wondering, Elide said to none of them in particular after a moment. Since Maeve is an imposter, who would rule Dornell if she was banished with all the other Valg? Or burned to a crisp, Fenris muttered. Aelin might have smiled grimly, but Elide's question settled into her. Gavriel set down the chicken. Rowan's arm dropped from Aelin's shoulder. His pine-green eyes were wide. You. Aelin blinked. There are others from Mab's line. Galen, or Adian. Oh God, please don't put Adian in charge of nothing! The throne passes through the maternal line, to a female only. Or it should have, Rowan said. You're the sole female with a direct, undiluted claim to Mab's bloodline. And your household, Rowan, Gavriel said. Someone in your household would have a claim on Mora's half of the throne. Celine. It would go to her. Even as a prince, Rowan's own heritage connecting him to Mora's bloodline had thinned to the point of being in name only. Aelin was more closely related to Elide, probably to KoA too, than she was to Rowan, despite their distant ancestry. There we are again, being reminded that they're related. Well, Celine can have it, Aelin said, wiping her hands of dust that was not there. Dornell's hers. She wouldn't set foot in that city again, Maeve or no. She wasn't sure if that made her a coward. She didn't dare reach for her magic's comforting rumble. The little folk truly knew you. Or truly knew, Fenris mused, rubbing his jaw, what you were. They had always known her, the little folk, had saved her life 10 years ago and saved their lives these past few weeks. They had known her and left gifts for her. Tribute, she'd thought, to Brannon's heir, not to, Gavriel murmured, the fairy queen of the West. Silence. Aelin blurted. Is that an actual title? It is now, Fenris muttered. Aelin shot him a look. With Celine as the Fae Queen of the East, Rowan mused. No one spoke for a good minute. Aelin sighed up at the ceiling. What's another fancy title, I suppose? They didn't answer, and Aelin tried not to let the weight of that title settle too heavily. All it implied, that she might not only look after the little folk on this continent, but with the Cadre, begin a new homeland for any Fae who might wish to join them, for any of the Fae who had survived the slaughter in Terrasen 10 years ago and might wish to return. A fool's dream, one that she would likely not come to see, to create. The Fairy Queen of the West, Aelin said, tasting the words on her tongue, wondering how long she'd get to call herself such. From the heavy quiet she knew her companions were contemplating the same, and from the pain in Rowan's eyes, the rage and determination, she knew he was already calculating if it might somehow spare her from the sacrificial altar. But that would come later, after tomorrow, if they survived. There was a gate, and eternity lay beyond its black archway, but not for her. No, there would be no afterworld for her. The gods had built another coffin, this time crafting it of that dark, glimmering stone her fire could never melt, never pierce. The only way to escape was to become it, dissolve into it like sea foam on a beach. Every breath was thinner than the previous one. They had not put any holes in the coffin. Beyond her confines, she knew a second coffin sat beside hers. Knew because the muffled screams within still reached her here. 2 princesses, one golden and one silver, one young and one ancient, both the cost of sealing that gate to eternity. The air would run out soon. She'd already lost too much of it in her frantic clawing at the stone. Her fingertips pulsed where she'd broken nails and skin. Those female screams became quieter. She should accept it, embrace it. Only when she did would the lid open. The air was so hot, so precious. She could not get out. Aelin hauled herself into waking. The room remained dark, her companion's deep breathing holding steady. Open, fresh air, the stars just visible through the narrow window. No wordstone coffin, no gate poised to devour her whole. But she knew they were watching, somehow. Those wretched gods, even here they were watching, waiting. A sacrifice. That's all she was to them. Nausea churned in her gut, but Aelin ignored it. Ignored the tremors rippling through her, the heat under her skin. Aelin turned onto her side, nestling closer into Rowan's solid warmth, Elena's muffled scream still ringing in her ears. No, she would not be helpless again. Chapter 55. Being in a female form wasn't entirely what Dorian had expected. The way he walked, the way he moved, his hips and legs, strange. Excuse me. So disconcertingly strange. If any of the Crochan had noticed a young witch amongst them pacing in circles, crouching and stretching her legs, they didn't halt their work as they readied the camp to depart. Then there was the matter of his breasts, which he'd never imagined to be so cumbersome, so unpleasant. But the shock of bumping his arms into them, the need to adjust his posture to accommodate their slight weight, was still fresh. Oh, I'm so sorry. Was still fresh after a few hours. He'd kept the transformation as simple as he could. He'd picked a young Crochan the night before, one of the novices who might not be needed at all hours or noticed very often, and studied her until she likely deemed him a lech. This morning, the image of her face and form still planted in his mind, he'd come to the edge of the camp and simply willed it. Well, perhaps not simply. The shift remained not an entirely enjoyable sensation. The bones adjusted, his scalp tingling with the long brown hair that grew out in shining waves, nose tickling as it was reshaped into a delicate curve. For long minutes, he'd only stared down at himself, at the delicate hands, the smaller wrists. Amazing how much strength the tiny bones contained. A few subtle pats between his legs had told him enough about the changes there. And so he'd been here for the past 2 hours, learning how the female body moved and operated, wholly different from learning how a raven flew, how it wrangled the wind. He thought he'd known everything about the female body, how to make a woman... Okay. He was half tempted to find a tent and... Oh, shut the fuck up. I knew his bitch ass was gonna think something like that. Oh my god. He was half tempted to find a tent and learn firsthand what certain things felt like. Not an effective use of his time. Not with the camp readying for travel. The 13 were on edge. They hadn't yet decided where to go, and hadn't been invited to travel with the Crochans to any of their home hearths, even Glennis's. None of them, however, had looked his way when they'd prowled past. None had recognized him. Dorian had just completed another walking circuit in his little training area when Manon stalked by, silver hair flowing. He paused, no more than a wary Crochan sentinel, and watched her storm through snow and mud as if she were a blade through the world. Manon had nearly passed his training area when she went rigid. Slowly, she turned, nostrils flaring. Those golden eyes swept over him, swift and cutting. Her brows twitched toward each other. Dorian only gave her a lazy grin in return. Then she prowled toward him. "I'm surprised you're not groping yourself." "Who says I haven't already?" Another assessing stare. "I would have thought you'd pick a prettier form." He frowned down at himself. "I think she's pretty enough." Manon's mouth tightened. "I suppose this means you're about to go to Morath." "Did I say anything of the sort?" He didn't bother sounding pleasant. Manon took a step toward him, her teeth flashing. In this body, he stood shorter than her. He hated the thrill that shot through his blood as she leaned down to growl at him. "We have enough to deal with today, Princeling. Do I look as if I'm standing in your way?" She opened her mouth, then shut it. Dorian let out a low laugh and made to turn away. An iron-tipped hand gripped his arm. Strange, for that hand to feel large on his body. Large, and not the slender, deadly thing he'd become accustomed to. Her golden eyes blazed. "If you want a soft-hearted woman who will weep over hard choices and ultimately balk from them, then you're in the wrong bed." Damn! "I'm not in anyone's bed right now." He hadn't gone to her tent any of these nights, not since that conversation in Ilwy. She took the retort without so much as a flinch. "Your opinion doesn't matter to me. And why are you standing here?" Again she opened and closed her mouth, then snarled. "Change out of that form." Dorian smiled again. "Don't you have better things to do right now, Your Majesty?" He honestly thought she might unsheath those iron teeth and rip out his throat. Half of him wanted her to try. He even went as far as to run one of those phantom hands along her jaw. "You think I don't know why you don't want me to go to Morath?" He could have sworn she trembled, could have sworn she arched her neck just a little bit, leaning into that phantom touch. Dorian ran those invisible fingers down her neck, trailing them along her collarbones. "Tell me to stay," he said, and the words had no warmth, no kindness. "Tell me to stay if that's what you want." His invisible fingers grew talons and scraped over her skin. Manon's throat bobbed. "But you won't say that, will you, Manon?" Her breathing turned jagged. He continued to stroke her neck, her jaw, her throat, caressing skin he'd tasted over and over. "Do you know why?" When she didn't answer, Dorian let one of those phantom talons dig in, just slightly. She swallowed, and it was not from fear. Dorian leaned in close, tipping his head back to stare into her eyes as he purred. "Because while you might be older, might be deadly in 1,000 different ways, deep down, you're afraid. You don't know how to ask me to stay, because you're afraid of admitting to yourself that you want it. You're afraid of yourself more than anyone else in the world. You're afraid." For several heartbeats, she just stared at him. Then she snarled, "You don't know what you're talking about," and stalked away. His low laugh ripped after her. Her spine stiffened, but Manon did not turn back. Damn! Damn! I have to go in on my girl like that. Afraid of admitting that she felt any sort of attachment. It was preposterous. And it was, perhaps, true. But it was not her problem. Not right now. Manon stormed through the readying camp, where tents were being taken down and folded, hearths being packed. The 13 were with the wyverns, supplies stowed in saddlebags. Some of the Crochans had frowned her way. Not with anger, but something like disappointment, discontent, as if they thought parting ways was a poor idea. Manon refrained from saying she agreed. Even if the 13 followed, the Crochans would find a way to lose them, use their power to bind the wyverns long enough to disappear. And she would not lower herself, lower the 13 to become dogs chasing after their masters. They might be desperate for aid, might have promised it to their allies, but she would not debase herself any further. Manon halted at Glennis's camp, the only hearth with a fire still burning, a fire that would always remain kindled, a reminder of the promise she'd made to honor the Queen of Terrasen, a single, solitary flame against the cold. Manon rubbed her face as she slumped onto one of the rocks lining the hearth. A hand rested on her shoulder, warm and slight. She didn't bother to slap it away. Glennis said, "We're departing in a few minutes. I thought I'd say goodbye." Manon peered up at the ancient witch. "Fly well." It was really all there was left to say. Manon's failure was not due to Glennis, not due to anyone but herself, she supposed. "You're afraid." It was true. She had tried, but not really tried to win the Crochans, to let them see any part of her that meant something, to let them see what it had done to her, to learn that she had a sister and that she had killed her. She didn't know how, and had never bothered to learn. "You're afraid." Yes, she was. Of everything. Glennis lowered her hand from Manon's shoulder. "May your path carry you safely through war and back home at last." She didn't feel like telling the crone there was no home for her, or the 13. Glennis turned her face toward the sky, sighing once, and her white brows narrowed, her nostrils flared. Manon leapt to her feet. "Run," Glennis breathed. "What?" "Run now." Manon drew Windcleaver and did no such thing. "What is it?" "They're here." How Glennis had scented them on the wind, Manon didn't care. Not as 3 wyverns broke from the clouds, spearing for their camp. She knew those wyverns, almost as well as she knew the 3 riders who sent the Crochans into a frenzy of motion. Oh, it's bad. Oh, it's bad. It's bad, I think. It's bad. Oh, it's really bad. I thought it was gonna be like Petra or someone else. No, it's bad. Oh, man. Hold on. I have to prepare. Oh, I didn't even read it to y'all. Hold on. Sorry. The matrons of the Iron Teeth witch clans had found them and come to finish what Manon had started that day in Morath. Sorry. Oh, it's bad. Oh, it's bad. It's like bad. Hold on. I have to put up my hair. I have to get ready. I don't know why I bought this big ass cloth. It's broken. My hair isn't even thick or really that long to need it, but whatever. It's bad. It's a little bad. Chapter 56. Oh god. Okay. Mentally prepare. Can I scoot my chair back? No, I cannot. Okay. Chapter 56. The 3 high witches had come alone. It didn't stop the Crochans from rallying, brooms swiftly airborne, a few of them trembling with what could only be recognition. Manon's grip on Windcleaver tightened at the slight tremor in her hand as the 3 witches landed in the edge of Glennis's fire, their wyverns crushing tents beneath. Astrid and Sorrel were instantly beside her, her seconds murmur swallowed by the crack of breaking tents. The shadows are airborne, but they signal no sign of another unit. None of their covens. No, and no sign of Iskra or Petra. Manon swallowed. The matrons truly had come alone, had flown in from wherever they'd been gathered and somehow found them, or tracked them. Manon didn't let that thought settle, that she may have led the 3 matrons right to this camp. Sorry, I'm nervous and I'm stumbling over my words. The soft snarls of the Crochans around her, pointed at Manon, said enough of their opinion. The wyverns settled, their long tails curling around them, those deadly poison-slick spikes ready to inflict death. Rushing steps crunched through the icy snow, halting at Manon's side, just as Dorian's scent wrapped around her. "Is that—" "Yes," she said quietly, heart thundering as the matrons dismounted and did not raise their hands to request for parley. No, they only stalked closer to the hearth, to the precious flames still burning. Don't engage, Manon warned him, and the others, and strode to meet them. It was not the king's battle, no matter what power dwelled in his veins. Glennis was already armed, an ancient sword in her withered hands. The woman was as old as the Yellowlegs matron, yet she stood tall, facing the 3 high witches. Cressida Blueblood spoke first. her eyes as cold as the iron-spiked crown digging in her freckled brow. It has been an age, Glennis. But Glennis's stare, Manon realized, was not on the blue-blood matron, or even on Manon's own grandmother, her black robes billowing as she sneered at Manon. It was on the Yellowlegs matron, hunched and hateful between them, on the crown of stars atop the crone's thinned white hair. Glennis's sword shook slightly, and just as Manon realized what the matron had worn here, Bronwyn appeared at Glennis's side and breathed, Rhiannon's crown, worn by the Yellowlegs matron to mock these witches, to spit on them. A dull roaring began in Manon's ear. "What company you keep these days, granddaughter?" said Manon's grandmother, her silver-streaked dark hair braided back from her face, a sign enough of their intentions if her grandmother's hair was in that plate. Battle. Annihilation. The weight of the three high witches' attention pressed upon her. The Crochans gathered behind her shifted as they waited for her response, yet it was Glennis who snarled, in a voice Manon had not yet heard. "What is it that you want?" Manon's grandmother smiled, revealing rust-flecked iron teeth, the true sign of her age. "You made a grave error, Manon, kinslayer, when you sought to turn our forces against us, when you sowed such lies amongst our sentinels regarding our plans, my plans." Manon kept her chin high. "I only spoke the truth, and it must have frightened you enough that you gathered these two to hunt me down and prove your innocence in scheming against them." The other two matrons didn't so much as blink. Her grandmother's claws had to have sunk deep then, or they simply did not care. "We came," Cressida seethed, the opposite in so many ways of the daughter who had given Manon the chance to speak, "to at last rid us of a thorn in our sides." Had Petra been punished for letting Manon walk out of the Omega alive? Oh, Petra's her from the Blue Bloods. Why is my ass over here getting Petra and Iskra confused? My dumbass, that's what I get. Had Petra been punished for letting Manon walk out of the Omega alive? Did the blue blood air still breathe? Cressida had once screamed in a mother's terror and pain when Petra had nearly plunged to her death. Did that love, so foreign and strange, still hold true? Or had duty and ancient hatred worn out? The thought was enough to steel Manon's spine. "You came because we pose a threat. Because of the threat you posed to that monster you call grandmother." "You came," Manon went on, Windcleaver rising a fraction, "because you are afraid." Manon took a step beyond Glennis, her sword lifting farther. "You came," Manon said, "because you have no true power beyond what we give you, and you are scared to death that we're about to take it away." Manon flipped Windcleaver in her hand, angling the sword downward, and drew a line in the snow between them. "You came alone for that fear, that others might see what we are capable of, the truth that you have always sought to hide." Her grandmother tutted. "Listen to you, sounding just like a Crochan with that with that preaching nonsense." Manon ignored her and pointed Windcleaver directly at the Yellowlegs matron as she snarled, "That is not your crown." Something like hesitation rippled over Cressida Blueblood's face, but the Yellowlegs matron beckoned to Manon with iron nails so long they curved downward. "Then come and fetch it from me, traitor." Manon stepped beyond the line she'd drawn in the snow. No one spoke behind her. She wondered if any of them were breathing. She had not won against her grandmother, had barely survived, and only thanks to luck. That fight, she had been ready to meet her end, to say farewell. Manon angled Windcleaver upward, her heart a steady, raging beat. She would not greet the darkness's embrace today, but they would. "This seems familiar," her grandmother drawled, legs shifting into attacking position. The other two matrons did the same. "The last Crochan queen, holding the line against us." Manon cracked her jaw, and iron teeth descended. A flex of her fingers had her iron nails unsheathing. Not just a Crochan queen this time. There was doubt in Cressida's blue eyes, as if she'd realized what the other two matrons had not. It was there that Manon would strike first, the one who now wondered if they had somehow made a grave mistake in coming here, a mistake that would cost them what they had come to protect, a mistake that would cost them this war, and their lives. For Cressida saw the steadiness in Manon's breathing, saw the clear conviction in her eyes, saw the lack of fear in her heart as Manon advanced another step. Manon smiled at the blue-blood matrons as if to say yes. "You did not kill me then," Manon said to her grandmother. "I do not think you will be able to now." "We'll see about that," her grandmother hissed and charged. Manon was ready. An upward swing of Windcleaver met her grandmother's first two blows, and Manon ducked the third, turning right into the onslaught of the Yellowlegs matron, who swept up with unnatural speed, feet almost flying over the snow, and slashed for Manon's exposed back. Manon deflected the crone's assault, sending the witch darting back just as Cressida launched herself at Manon. Cressida was not a trained fighter, not as the Blackbeak and Yellowlegs matrons were. Too many years spent reading in trails and scanning the stars for the answers to the three-faced goddess's riddles. A duck to the left had Manon easily evading the sweep of Cressida's nails, and a counter-move had Manon driving her elbow into the blue-blood matron's nose. Cressida crumbled. The Yellowlegs matron and her grandmother attacked again. So fast. Their 3 assaults had happened in the span of a few blinks. Manon kept her feet under her, saw where one matron moved and the other left a dangerous gap exposed. She was not a broken spirited wing leader unsure of her place in the world. She was not ashamed of the truth before her. She was not afraid. Damn loud-ass bird. Manon's grandmother led the attack, her maneuvers the deadliest. It was from her that the first slice of pain appeared, a rip of iron nails through Manon's shoulder. But Manon swung her sword again and again, iron on steel ringing out across the icy peaks. No, she was not afraid at all. Period, as she shouldn't be. The baddest one out there. Dorian had never seen fighting like what unfolded before him, had never seen anything that fast, that lethal, had never seen anyone move like Manon, a whirlwind of steel and iron. 3 against 1. The odds weren't in her favor. Not when standing against one of them had left Manon on death's threshold months earlier. Yet where they struck, she was already gone, already parrying. She did not land many blows, but rather kept them at bay. Yet they did not land many either. Dorian's magic writhed, seeking a way out to stop this, but she had ordered him to stand down, and he'd obey. Around him the Crochans thrummed with fear and dread, either for the fight unfolding or the 3 matrons who had found them, but Glennis did not tremble. At her side, Bronwyn hummed with the energy of one eager to leap into the fight. Manon and the High Witches sprang apart, breathing heavily. Blue blood leaked down from Manon's shoulder, and small slices peppered the 3 matrons. Manon still remained on the far side of the line she'd drawn, still held it. The dark-haired witch in voluminous black robes spat blue blood onto the snow. Manon's grandmother. Pathetic as your mother. A sneer toward Glennis. And your father. The snarl that ripped from Manon's throat rang across the mountains themselves. Her grandmother let out a crow's caw of a laugh. Is that all you can do, then? Snarl like a dog and swing your sword like some like some human filth. We will wear you down eventually. Better to kneel now and die with some honor intact. Manon only flung out an iron-tipped fang behind her, fingers splaying in demand as her eyes remained fixed on the matrons. Dorian reached for Damaris, but Bronwyn moved first. The Crochan tossed her sword, steel flashing over snow and sun. Manon's fingers closed on the hilt, the blade singing as she whipped it around to face the High Witches again. There I go again, stumbling over her name. Rhiannon Crochan held the gates for 3 days and 3 nights, and she did not kneel before you, even at the end. A slash of a smile. I think I shall do the same. Dorian could have sworn the sacred flame burning to their left flared brighter, could have sworn Glennis sucked in a breath, that every Crochan watching did the same. Manon's knees bent, sword rising. Let us finish what was started then, too. She attacked, blades flashing. Her grandmother conceded step after step, the 2 other matrons failing to break past her defenses. Gone was the witch who had slept and wished for death. Gone was the witch who had raged at the truth that had torn her to shreds. And in her place, fighting as if she were the very wind, unfaltering against the matrons, stood someone Dorian had not yet met. Stood a queen of 2 peoples. The Yellowlegs matron launched an offensive that had Manon yielding a step, then another, swords rising against each slashing blow, yielding only those few steps and nothing more, because Manon, with conviction in her heart, with utter fearlessness in her eyes, was wholly unstoppable. The Yellowlegs matron pushed Manon close enough to the line that her heels nearly touched it. The other two witches had fallen back, as if waiting to see what might happen. For a hunched crone, the Yellowlegs witch was the portrait of nightmares, worse than Baba Yellowlegs had ever been. Her feet barely seemed to touch the ground, and her curved iron nails drew blood wherever they slashed. Manon's swords blocked blow after blow, but she made no move to advance, to push back, though Dorian saw several chances to do so. Manon took the slashings that left her arm and side bleeding, but she yielded no further ground, a wall against which the Yellowlegs matron could not advance. The crone let out a snarl, attacking again and again, senseless and raging. Dorian saw the trap the moment it happened, saw the side that Manon left open, the bait laid on a silver platter. Worked into a fury, the Yellowlegs matron didn't think twice before she lunged, claws out. Manon was waiting. Lost in her bloodlust, the Yellowlegs matron's horrible face lit with triumph as she went for the easy killing blow that would rip out Manon's heart. The Blackbeak matron barked in warning, but Manon was already moving. Just as those curved claws tore through leather and skin, Manon twisted to the side and brought down Windcleaver upon the Yellowlegs matron's outstretched neck. Blue blood sprayed upon the snow. Dorian did not look away this time at the head that did not look away this time. Are you kidding? SJM, that was horrible. That was horrible. She deserves jail time for this line. Dorian did not look away this time at the head that tumbled to the ground, at the brown-robed body that fell with it. The two remaining matrons halted. None of the Crochans behind Dorian so much as spoke, as Manon stared down pitilessly at the bleeding torso of the Yellowlegs matron. No one seemed to breathe at all, as Manon plunged Bronwyn's sword into the icy earth beneath and bent to take the crown of stars from the Yellowleg witch's fallen head. He had never seen a crown like it, a living, glowing thing that glittered in her hand, as if 9 stars had been plucked from the heavens and set to shine along the simple silver band. The crown's light danced over Manon's face as she lifted it above her head and set it upon her unbound white hair. Even the mountain wind stopped. Yet a phantom breeze shifted the strands of Manon's hair as the crown glowed bright, the white stars shining with cores of cobalt and ruby and amethyst, as if it had been asleep for a long, long time, and now awoke. That phantom wind pulled Manon's hair to the side, silver strands brushing across her face, and beside him, around him, the 13 touched 2 fingers to their brow in in allegiance to the queen who stared down the 2 remaining high witches. The Crochan queen, crowned anew. The sacred fire leaped and danced as if in joyous welcome. Manon scooped up Bronwyn's sword, lifting it and Windcleaver, and said to the blue-blood matron, the witch appearing barely a few years older than Manon herself, "Go." The blue-blood witch blinked, eyes wide with what could only be fear and dread. Manon jerked her chin toward the wyvern, waiting behind the witch. "Tell your daughter all debts between us are paid, and she may decide what to do with you. Take the other wyvern out of here." Manon's grandmother bristled, iron teeth flashing as if she'd bark a counter-command to the blue-blood matron, but the witch was already running for her wyvern, spared by the Crochan queen on behalf of the daughter who had given Manon the gift of speaking to the iron teeth. Within seconds, the blue-blood matron was in the skies, the Yellowlegs witch's wyvern soaring beside her, leaving Manon's grandmother alone, leaving Manon with swords raised and a crown of stars glowing upon her brow. Manon was glowing, as if the stars atop her head pulsed through her body, a wondrous and mighty beauty like no other in the world, like no one had ever been, or would be again. And slowly, as if savoring each step, Manon stalked toward her grandmother. Damn. She's about it. Ugh. Manon's lips curved into a small smile while she advanced on her grandmother. Warm, dancing light flowed through her, as unfaltering as what had poured into her heart these past few bloody minutes. She did not balk, did not fear. The crown's weight was slight, like it had been crafted of moonlight, yet the joyous strength was a song undimming before the sole high witch left standing. So Manon kept walking. She left Bronwyn's sword a few feet away, left Windcleaver several feet past that. Iron nails out, teeth ready, Manon paused barely 5 steps from her grandmother. A hateful, wasted scrap of existence. That's what her grandmother was. She had never realized how much shorter shorter the matron stood, how narrow her shoulders were, or how the years of rage and hate had withered her. Manon's smile grew, and she could have sworn she felt 2 people standing at her shoulder. She knew no one would be there if she looked, knew no one else could see them, sense them, standing with her, standing with their daughter against the witch who had destroyed them. Her grandmother spat on the ground, baring her rusted teeth. This death, though, it was not her death to claim. It did not belong to the parents whose spirits lingered at her sides, who might have been there all along, leading her toward this, who had not left her, even with death separating them. No, it did not belong to them either. She looked behind her, toward the second waiting beside Dorian. Tears slid down Astrid's face, of pride and relief. Manon beckoned to Astrid with an iron-tipped hand. Snow crunched, and Manon whirled, angling to take the brunt of the attack. I was gonna say, why the fuck would she literally, like, give her back? Like, why would she literally expose her back to this woman? But her grandmother had not charged. Not at her. No, the Blackbeak matron sprinted for her wyvern, fleeing. Damn. The Crochans tensed, fear giving way to wrath as her grandmother hauled herself onto the saddle. Manon raised a hand. Let her go. A snap of the reins and her grandmother was airborne, the great wyvern's wings blasting them with foul wind. Manon watched as the wyvern rose higher and higher. Her grandmother did not look back before she vanished into the skies. When there was no trace of the matrons left but blue blood and a headless corpse staining the snow, Manon turned toward the Crochans. Their eyes were wide, but they made no move. The 13 remained where they were, Dorian with them. Manon scooped up both swords, sheathing Windcleaver across her back, and stalked toward where Glennis and Bronwyn stood, monitoring her every breath. Wordlessly, Manon handed Bronwyn her sword, nodding in thanks. Then she removed the crown of stars and extended it toward Glennis. This belongs to you, she said, her voice low. The Crochans murmured, shifting. Glennis took the crown, and the stars dimmed. A small smile graced the crone's face. No, she said, it does not. Manon didn't move as Glennis lifted the crown and set it again on Manon's head. Then the ancient witch knelt in the snow. What was stolen has been restored, and what was lost has come home again. I hail thee, Manon Crochan, queen of witches. Manon stood fast against the tremor that threatened to buckle her legs, stood fast as the other Crochans, Bronwyn with them, dropped to a knee. Dorian, standing amongst them, smiled brighter and freer than she'd ever seen. And then the 13 knelt, 2 fingers going to their brows as they bowed their heads, fierce pride lightening their faces. Queen of witches, Crochan and Blackbeak declared as one voice, as one people. Damn. Plug in your phone. Hey, my phone's not dying yet. I actually made it through alive without my phone dying. Damn. That's crazy. We're just reading 56, right? Yeah, we're just reading through. Okay, so we're done. That felt short today. That felt short. Ooh. Scared. Scared for what's to come. Okay, so that wasn't as bad as I thought. I thought the matrons were gonna get there. They were gonna kill everybody, or at least kill Glennis. But they were gonna kill Glennis. But I'm glad that they survived. I'm glad everyone survived. Manon is iconic. Love her. Dorian is a menace to my mental health and to Manon's mental health, and I think he needs to be stopped. The next one is longer. Oh, God. Oh, so then I probably can't read it tomorrow. I have to go back to work tomorrow. And I'm not looking forward to it. Not looking forward to it. I don't want to go back to work tomorrow. And be scared for next time? Fuck that. If I have to be scared, I'm not reading it. I'm just skipping those chapters, and I'll deal with the aftermath that comes in later chapters. Like I'll deal with the aftermath, I won't deal with the actual thing. What happens? Whose chapter is next? Let me see. Whose chapter is next? Rowan? Oh shit. So we're at the battle. Okay, but I thought I didn't have to worry about this battle in Anil. Like, I thought this was just like a yeah, it was kind of bad, but now that Aelin and her, you know, people are there, that it was gonna be fine. Like, I honestly haven't been sweating this battle at all. Should I have been? Should I have been worried? Oh, yes? Damn. No. What? I thought they had this battle in the bag. What could happen? What goes wrong? Unless, like, Erwin himself is there or something, or Kale's dad does something stupid. Does someone die? Do I need the hoodie? What chapter? Ignorance is bliss. I don't remember. I think it's 57 through 61. It's gonna be a long live. So yeah, it's through 61. They're just gonna hug it out. Why can't they do that? In all honesty, why can't they fucking do that? Save me the pain. Save themselves the pain. Just hug it out. The wall and the horse next time. Yeah, so I think I might have to wait to do it then until like the weekend, because if it's a long live, then it's gonna be dark and I just don't want to deal with that. So I'll focus on getting the lives that I did over Christmas break uploaded this week, because I'm only working 3 days. So I'll get those lives uploaded, and then this weekend we'll do these long chapters. The Valg all show up like, you know what, our bad, you guys. We're just gonna head out. Why can't they just be self-aware? Why can't they realize that they're the problem? Why can't we all just be a little more self-aware? Oh Lord. Okay, now see, I wasn't sweating this battle at all, and now I'm gonna have to go through every possible worst case scenario that could happen, and I know I'm gonna get one of them right. I don't think y'all realize that I don't like being right in my theories. Like, I don't like creating these theories and then having them come true, because they're horrible. Oh God, sucks. This sucks. My book has very bad water damage. From this part, or like in general? Because like, I know at some point I've been coasting, right? I've been coasting throughout the whole first half of this book. Nothing has really moved me the way I was preparing myself to be moved. Like, yes, sad things have happened, and yes, I have already cried at some of the things that happen here, but up until this point, nothing has truly shaken me. Here on, I don't know what to expect. I don't. And I'm kind of scared. So, will I need a hoodie for the next live? Yes or no? And when I ask for the hoodie, that means someone D-words. Dangerous zone now. I'm in the danger zone. B is accidentally manifesting bad things with our theories. No, honestly, sometimes I think to myself, like, would this have even honestly ever happened if I hadn't thought about it? Like, I honestly just feel like I manifest max pain for myself. Except for when I read the Assassin's Blade. I genuinely did not think anything bad was going to happen in the Assassin's Blade. And I will never be caught slacking ever again like I was with that book. What do you think happens? I mean, I hadn't thought about it. So now that I have to think about it, I'm like, well, now that I'm sat here thinking about it, what could happen? That's a possibility. Another possibility is Assassin's Blade ever again. And I'm kind of sad about it because it was a moment. It's like, you had to be there. You had to be there. Hi, Caitlin. People in, but I don't see that happening. What else? I mean, we also have Adian and Lysandra, like, literally, death is upon them. Death is knocking at their door, literally, right now. They have an entire Morath army after them. It's half a day's ride away. It said they'll reach them by morning. So I also have them to stress out about. Y'all, Adian and Lysandra's scene made me so sad. It made me so sad. I was so distraught reading it. I'm so sad that he turned out that way. Kind of don't like SJM for turning him into that bad. And then this made me feel so bad. I hate it. My poor Lysandra. She deserves so much better. Phone's dying, sorry. When she told Adian that she had never been, what did she say? She had never been so humiliated or never been so, like, just, you know, felt so nasty in her life. And considering how her life was, like, so sad. Broke me. Whatever. Made me cry a little bit. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for letting me know that I have something to worry about in the next coming chapters, because now, fuck, I'm just gonna be thinking about it. I'll probably post like a theory video or something now that I know that I have to theorize. But so yeah, no lives for the rest of the week. We'll start fresh on Saturday, and we'll do a long one on Saturday. And then New Year's Day, New Year's Eve, like that Sunday, I'm probably not doing anything. I'm not gonna schedule a live though, just in case. And then New Year's Day, for sure I'm not doing anything, so I can go live that day. And yeah, I'll see y'all on Saturday. Bye.